covered.
We're going to go live.
Right, I guess we'll get started. Hello, everyone. We're just joining by
Kathy and Amy are both online.
Ian.
Hi, Kathy. Hi, Amy.
Hey, good afternoon. Sorry, I'm a little under the weather, so I thought this might be the best option.
Thanks for not sharing.
You're welcome.
All right, just a moment to pull up the agenda. We'll get started. I believe we have to, first order of business, I believe, is to confirm the minutes of the last meeting. So does anyone have any changes to that? I know we have it by email. In the review, did anybody make any changes or notations? No?
No. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Second.
And I believe we can say all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Nope, okay. So we have blocked off 2 hours today to talk about the funding scenario 2, which is where we landed at the end of last meeting together. So let's talk about if anybody has any thoughts on where we left off and what the funding scenario looks like. So it looks like, are there 21? How many projects are funded in scenario 2 as we have it?
23.
23. Okay. And we discussed funding at 100% for those that scored higher, and then was it below the 90 percentile that we then applied the 80%?
Yeah, so 90 and above is 100%.
Okay.
And then 87 to 89.9 is at 80%.
And we did decide that that cap of 80,000 would apply to those in that category that had applied for more.
Correct. And that scenario right now has 23 funded and you have $55 left over.
Gotcha. Okay.
And just as a reminder, the committee did ask staff to pull together some additional information last time. So you'll see in the updated spreadsheet that that includes the FY23 funded amount, if any of the projects in this funding scenario 2 had been funded this current fiscal year. And there were 5 projects, I believe, that landed in are currently funded through strategic partnership grants. We also pulled information based on the responses that applicants provided regarding geography search. And then looked at the scores by focus area and took some averages in all the focus areas, just as a reminder.
There's a little sound.
Yeah.
It's the NSA.
So I guess I want to start out by asking if there are any topics anybody wants to discuss with this information at our fingertips, questions, anything to talk over with the funding scenario or the additional information that staff has pulled together for us.
Do you mind going back to the previous training?
The one with the scores by the focus area?
So I believe this was asked for to look at possible disparities in the average overall all score of any of the given focus areas. I think specifically environmental stewardship was pointed out last meeting, but they all fall in that 80% range average. So
Well, and then it was asked to see it further down, like per scoring criteria as well, which is what this bottom section is. And there's really no major outliers in any of the scoring criteria. So that is the average per focus area per scoring category.
Is the theory behind why we have percentage of applications funded so much higher in education as a result of that higher average score? On the top of the overall page, I'm referencing percentage of applications funded. I think it's at the very top. There might be a hidden column. Column F.
oh yeah, that's hidden on the spreadsheet.
That's 62% of applications funded in education versus these other percentages in other focus areas. The driver of that is education application score really well.
It also tells us, and I may have been the one to ask for some of the data, maybe, at that meeting, that it could be that the way the questions are, the application is framed and what we're evaluating biases toward one area rather than another. And so not for this cycle, but in looking for next cycle, to think that through, if that makes sense, that one in four resident well-being ones are funded and a majority of the education ones are being funded. It's not to say there is a bias, but it's to say we need to consider what the criteria are. Have we been biasing one area over another by the way we're asking you for information, the way we're scoring? Doesn't mean we have to change it. It's good to have self-awareness. If I may, Kate, one other thing. It could be that the capacity for filling out applications varies between group as well. And then we might look at the support. So it could be a bias, and I'm not saying it is, I have no idea, I haven't thought it through, that people who do the education capable community are doing more grants, and they're more used to grant applications, and they have greater capacity than the average group in one of the other categories, possibly. And then we might look at, is there additional support that might be offered to grant applicants to help even that out, possibly.
Is there, are we planning on, I know that there's been a grant workshop each year. Is that in the plan to do again for the next cycle? Just maybe that's an important piece to keep in place.
It could be, or, and I don't know, but, or we could make it a required session. I'm not saying we should. I'm saying there'd be possible ways to think it through to say, well, how can we make sure everyone's putting their best foot forward in these applications?
Strong slate.
This is good information to have for planning for next year. And definitely looking at how we score things can give us some really good information. So I like that for the planning. And And I know we also talked about maybe making a hard cap written in for next time. Those are all good things for, which month is it that we begin planning for the next?
We'll meet in June.
Yes, okay. So those are all really good things to circle back to in June, I think, and talk over. That's really important. I know we're all trying to make this process as good as it can possibly be. And when we talked, we realized we may be unintentionally creating a new problem by having people, the possibility that people may feel they need to apply for more than they would necessarily need because we're discounting some funding. So all that information is really, really helpful for the planning. For today's purposes, when we look at the funding scenario as it is on the screen, does anyone want to talk over any of the specific programs or the way that it looks, or do you want to talk about the 100% versus the 80%? Those are some conversations we should probably focus on for right now, just to make sure we're going to end up in that 2-hour window with our answers and recommendations for the county commissioners.
I'd like to start off by talking about our largest grant. I know that one of our conversations last time was about salaries, and we talked if we didn't fully fund, we may lose an entire funding opportunity. I mean, a person, I can't think of it, FTE, full-time employee, because of cutting funding for that particular event. I recall reading the description for YTL, and it was mostly salary. I don't recall how much of that was salary. There were other things in there, but the summer and advocacy support was overwhelmingly for one person's salary. So I just want to make sure that, I know we arbitrarily said no more than $80,000. $80,000 is our largest grant among the 23. I don't know if that has an impact on that individual, or if we should put so much towards one individual's salary. So I'm kind of balancing both sides.
So it's a good point for discussion. What does everyone think? What are your thoughts on that?
So for me, and I heard Chuck on both sides, and by the way, love the shirt, Chuck, really awesome. You know, as we did our scoring, it's our third highest, basically at 92%. So however we took it as a committee, we responded pretty strongly to that application. I regret that we didn't make it a hard cap. I mean, it's a different committee, which shifted a little bit, and there was real resistance to that. I heard more openness last meeting for next year for the hard cap, just to be fair to organizations, so that when they're putting forward something, they're doing it in a way that makes sense given the cap, because we basically turned our soft cap into a hard cap. It's basically what we did at the last meeting, and I regret that. At the same time, I understand why we did that. So money can flow to more organizations. So I'd be disinclined to punish that application because it's primarily going to salary, which, as I recall, that application is just overseeing programming for those kids. Yeah, I'll put a period at the end of that. I had a breath like I was going to say more, but I'll stay there.
The current recommended amount is 64% of their request.
Which program was it?
YTL.
You know, a lot of these programs that we are funding have other means of funding. Some of them have fairly large budgets. I don't see why they can't maybe supplement the salary from their overall budget. Just the thought.
Do we have a spreadsheet on their budget?
Yes, so they're requesting 75,000 for personnel. I don't see how many positions they're looking.
But to Doug's point, do they have other sources?
They do. They have several that are pending. They've also applied for other county funding. And they have $110,000 committed through other sources, revenue sources. Of the total program cost in their budget is $487,000. They requested $125,000 through the strategic partnership grant.
It's my understanding correct that staff is going to reach out to each individual reason to ask them how not receiving 100% of funding affects the project.
Yeah, so if you all recommend partial funding, then we will work with them, to see, if they're gonna scale their project or part of it, how it would best work within the amount that you do fund. And that's what their contract will be based on, and their performance measures and all, and we'll work with them to get those developed at the lower amounts.
It's actually 5 positions in 75.
I looked for a breakdown of the positions that feed into that, and I don't see a listing.
It's the numbers.
It doesn't say how many FTEs. It could be a combination of part-time and full-time. They have a couple of administrators and then lots of direct care folks.
Is that the nonprofit that had problems with their executive director?
There is another one with Y in the name that was in the newspaper.
Right.
YMI.
Why am I? Thank you.
Which is different than
Correct.
personnel.
Thanks for clarifying.
YMI is a group that has gotten funding from this.
Yeah, we did.
in the past.
Mhm.
The current year. I don't know if there's a scenario this time.
So they did, I want to clarify, they did request 75,000 for personnel. They also requested an additional $11,250 for essentially benefits, payroll taxes.
I agree that I wish we'd made that soft cap a hard cap in retrospect so that we set the expectation at a certain point. I think that we gave them the soft cap, gave them some direction.
No, I just to say, Kate, I completely
yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
But, we immediately made the soft cap a hard cap.
I know.
We didn't really think about it or talk about it the way we intended to. So that was somewhat unfair to applicants who might have put a lot of work into
Agreed.
the few that were higher than that hard cap, for good reason. But I completely agree. I'm not objecting to it. Just kind of pointing it out that it's our third high, it's a very high grant amount relative to the overall group, right? But it's still our third highest score. So we thought well of it. So it's just kind of caught in between the little.
We will ask you again during reflection time if you want to be open to more than one application per organization next time.
That's definitely a discussion we should have, and certainly for the June meeting, like we need to decide on that, because as we look at the amount, I mean, each year the money's gonna go less far. Just the cost of inflation and with the money that we have to give not changing. And we've seen an increase in the grant applications, and these are wonderful programs. I mean, it's heartbreaking that we can't fund more. But we're gonna have to make quick choices to try to give as good direction as possible to fund what we can.
I don't want to cut that conversation short, especially with Chuck, but there's another organization I emailed staff about when I was looking at that application, either in this program or another program, that maybe we can talk about a little bit, which is Babies Need Bottoms, where I think the request, there's another county grant program I'm involved in that also got a request, and sometimes, nope,
They were not funded in that, they weren't recommended to a program.
I missed that meeting. I was in Washington, sorry, good to know. But it also goes to just the budget, and I believe if I remember that, I don't have that with me. If I remember that proposal right, it was a shift in program. They just instead of doing diapers, was it diaper rash? Am I remembering that correctly? For nodding. And just like what that means when basically, and it's nothing against this program, I certainly gave them a high score. It's one of our highest scoring, it's 5th or 6th. When it's just kind of a budgetary slush fund. Okay, now we're naming this program, then we're slushing it over here and naming this as a program. What that means, no criticism of that organization or the work they do, which is great. And whether that fits like this.
It's somewhat of a consequence of coming up with criteria. We try to be really careful in naming what that criteria are. Like a different example was the 3-year cap on how long projects can be funded. We chose the word project instead of organization carefully, and organizations are able to reconfigure work that can be substantially similar, and sometimes it's really clear that it's a different project and sometimes it's not. We have a similar rule. The same project can't be submitted to more than one grant program for funding. We keep it in one place. They named it differently, but there was some concern that they were substantially the same. But it didn't get picked up in the other grant program, so it is not a concern of double funding. Right. But we're in that kind of gray area. What we try to do is talk with those organizations about the intent behind the rule as well as the letter of the rule itself, and then leave it to their discretion.
Right, and then it kind of shifts, if you have a clear line being crossed, then you're going to note that. But otherwise, then it's just us as our responsibility as a review committee for what's okay and what's not. And where I get concerned is, I remember the first year that was like one of my highest scores. It's such an easy one to do because of course that's a need, but is it perpetual funding at that point? I think in my first year on one of these committees, I said maybe that's just something the county should be funding itself at this point. It's such a basic need. But if we know that organizations are doing that, again, not to specify this more broadly.
And we did refer this organization to the sections of the county services that serve clients that might have diaper needs, so like social work and the nutrition and WIC program that serves mothers within children, so that if they have diaper needs, they could procure those with operational dollars. I don't know the result of that.
And Rachel, if we did 3 years of diaper rash, and then at the end of the 3 years, they switch back to a diaper program, that would probably be fine, according to the rules.
I don't think it's sequential, I think it's a
3 years total.
Okay, so, okay,
Or organization or project.
A project. And just for everybody's sake, Kim has joined, so she's on here now as well.
Well,
Okay.
in a large organization with different distinct departments and lines of service, it makes sense to think about projects as really different. In small organizations like this, it's hard to notice the distinction between the projects and the other.
and I'm certainly not, again, objecting to this organization or funding it. It's just that I see this as something that could become perpetual funding, and then does that make sense for this grant program? That's just what I kind of want to do.
Well, it is a perpetual need.
It absolutely is.
And I don't know who else was on the site visit with me, but I was amazed how much how much of the funding amount went to specific products.
I completely agree. And I gave it a high score. It's not that I gave them a low score because of that. I gave it a high score. It's just more about what grant programs do then, and if it becomes perpetual funding through this grant program, why does that make sense? It kind of blocks out other organizations in that way. I'm not saying that we're going to support it all.
No, I get your point. It's a point you're bringing up, not a specific organization. I understand that. And that's something I think we'll continue to struggle with each year because, you know, the need is more than the funds available, I think. And so at what point do you say not here anymore, then you leave them on a funding cliff? And what is that? What would that look like and what would their options be? And that, you know, we're human, it gives us heartburn. What do we do?
Well, it's also, if we had harder rules, which might go to, again, the 3-year cliff, then organizations can anticipate the cliff. Right now, if you can slush around the ask, you can't actually anticipate that cliff. You think you can keep getting it because we're going to keep doing high scores, which I will, by the way, just to be clear.
Clear, sure.
I think that's another conversation for our June, when we try to plan for next year, how hard, what kind of, is it a hard line, is it a soft line? What are we gonna, what direction are we gonna give groups so that they can set their expectations accordingly?
I really agree with that. And then to be honest with ourselves, that we will never, and a part of the word, punish on the back end or repeating. So it either has to be front end rulemaking to clean it up, to clear that up, or it's perpetual funding and we're okay with that, which in this instance I am. But does that make sense with the program?
Captured. We'll bring it back in June.
And maybe that's something we ask for additional guidance on. You know, if this committee was put together to carry out the direction of the commissioners, then we ask those questions. Can you provide additional guidance to us as we navigate so that we're doing what you intend to be done?
When we meet in June, we'll be asking for volunteers to join this subgroup to plan for summer. I think it's August.
Oh, it is August, yeah.
Presentation.
That's right. All right, so we've kind of raised a couple of issues. Chuck, do you want to circle back to YTL? Do you want to discuss that more? We didn't get clarity, I know. Because we had that soft cap, just for my perspective, I'm okay with the 80, but that doesn't mean everybody else is. So I want to hear what people think about that. If you think, if you want to continue to talk about it and maybe you'll change your mind.
No, to Ray's point, I didn't want to penalize or, you know, bring them up as a good example. My concern was we were not funding an FTE because we cut $45,000. We answered the question.
Okay. I've been remote at these meetings. I know it's hard sometimes to hear or.
I don't feel uncomfortable with the 80,000 limit. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I think it was, you know, I mean, we suggested limiting it to 80,000. So I think people probably knew that that was a possibility. And I do think people have access to other funding.
And I haven't spoken to her about the grant this year, but I know last year I did, and last year I think she asked for a similar over amount that we could give her, and she just spoke and said, you know, any amount would be greatly appreciated, and she would accept whatever, and would, you know, continue to work. I think in the summer and such, she pays individual tutors to come and work with students based on their needs and such. So I think it would, what it would affect would be the amount that she's going to pay those tutors and other amounts that she had planned on utilizing the funding for.
So I just want to make sure, in case I missed something or misinterpreted, just because it's hard sometimes virtually, to get all of the information. Is anyone opposed to the 80,000 cap for that specific ask?
I'm not opposed.
I'm not.
Okay. Thank you. So what other projects does anyone want to talk about? Is anyone concerned about the amount of funding as it's allocated in scenario 2, just the way it is there? Is anyone concerned that we're any projects are going to be at a significant disadvantage because we've, as it's been allocated? What are your thoughts? We've got plenty of time today, so.
So I mean, I looked through, I tried to punch holes in our theories. So I looked through and I really couldn't find another option that seemed better. You know, I mean, by cutting the percent, I would love to give to more organizations, but I just think that you can't support them as well. And I didn't see anything that I thought was going to be a limit to the organizations that were getting 80% rather than 100%. So I felt actually really comfortable with the strategy we came up with.
Okay. That's good. That's good feedback, Doug.
This is Dusty. I was really excited about.
I will say that there, not everyone. Say if there's a concern outside of just your preference for the project that should be highlighted. If there's something that we should be aware of, I would like to know. But I haven't observed that there's anything that seems like it would be a reason not to fund the ones that we chose.
Thank you.
I was just really so happy to see the program Working Wheels.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was the best idea anybody had come up with yet. I own 6 automobiles, and I have 5 children, and I'm married, and it's a tough job making some money. There's always one that's got something wrong, and if you don't have a car in Logan County, you're toast. That's the fastest way to losing your job. But anyway, and I'm so glad to see it out of high school. The other thing I've wondered about when I look at all these organizations, they're applying for a lot of other grants. And I'm ignorant about the whole grant world, other than serving on this committee. I just wonder, do they all, because they're always like pending. And some of them are pretty big requests. And I'm like, if they got this request, I would be a little hesitant about, I would just, maybe we could give it to some lesser light that's not, I noticed that the Haywood Street Congregation, which is a great organization, and I fully support them as well, but they got to have $1 million grant from, to support the program that we have supported in the past. And I'm like, are those, and do most of the, like the Dogwood Health Trust, do they specify, like we do, you use this money for certain projects, or do they say, here's $50,000? Now, I'm just curious.
Most grants are project specific these days.
I assume they were.
However, there are some funders that are doing more operational grants and flexible funding. It is very tough to be in the shoes of the organizations where they're asked to give a budget for the upcoming year. We collect these in February. And so much is unknown because of the season and the cycle of waiting for notifications of funding.
Right. And then they're probably all sort of on the same schedule, most of these grant giving
It's
organizations.
common, the ones that are like us that are on a fiscal year.
Okay.
Dogwood, you gave an example, they have a couple cycles per year, I think now. But it does vary with the different.
Right.
And you could make a contrary argument. I'm not necessarily making it.
No.
That, let's say, an organization is applying for a 50,000 grant, and they're $1 million organization. And other very small organizations applying for a 50,000 grant, that's going to be the bulk of their funding. It could be because of the administrative costs, just a scale, that this 50,000 actually funds the program more thoroughly than this 50,000, because they have all the other pieces in place around it. So it flips a little bit, right?
Sure.
Yes, it gets a little confusing in doing that, just in terms of overall budget and what we're contributing. Sometimes I know we're looking, well, they've got different settings, including this committee. Look, they're getting funded here, so we don't really have to fund them. But that funding might also, not getting that funding might eliminate a project that does good. So sometimes it's hard to see from where we are.
Yeah, sure. Just curious.
Yeah, that's great.
So far, so this is where we are. We're at this funding scenario number 2 with the 100% and the 80% and the 23 projects with at least 80% funding of the ask. We set aside plenty of time today. So if anybody has a concern by project or a concern about the 80% versus another percentage, let's keep talking through that. Anything anybody wants to bring up, this is the perfect time.
Or if everybody just loves this scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The project in town of Black Wall Street, ABL, 70,000. I don't have in my notes what that project is for. I can go back and reread the application. Anybody?
Let me pull it up. Title: Strengthening BIPOC Businesses in WNC.
Yeah, that's the title of the project, but I forgot how money was going to be used.
The budget for the requested amounts of personnel, 30,000, supplies, 20,000, and then a separate program, Black Wall Street Junior, 20,000. So the youth component on their budget notes, let's see what they say. The 30,000 on salaries is to support a portion of their executive director. The supplies is technical assistance for the businesses. It's like a pretty miscellaneous category with training, subscriptions, etc. And then Black Wall Street Junior is, it looks like direct support to the youth that would be participating, stipends.
They listed their key components of their project plan as business technical assistance, financial literacy, coaching, and partner connections.
I'm in favor of that. I just didn't realize, I didn't remember why I gave it such a high score. I think it was well written, this one.
Job creation, outcomes, revenue increases for the participating businesses.
So with that one, just out of curiosity, because we did fund them previously, is that the same project? Is it a different project? I'm just wondering how it was cast actually, I don't recall. So,
It is the same project.
okay.
We funded them at 47,500 for this current fiscal year. And we're proposing
That out.
70,000.
There's a lot of information.
Was the 47,500, was that a partial?
That's a partial last year. Yeah, they were all partial last year, but I believe that one was one of the lower ones last year. I think they might have been like in the 60%. I think they had a rather large ask last year and they ended up with that. Again, they were one of the ones that said they could accept any amount with help, so.
We do, I think, quarterly reports from the grantees,
That's correct.
and they indicate to us how much of the budget, how much of the grant is actually spent during the course of the year. I'm thinking for next year, just want to add another column, whether they spent 100% of the grant or not.
So going into the timing that the application is, we can tell you if they spent all of their FY23, but we wouldn't be able to tell you about the 24 because when they apply in February, they're just in the second quarter of that grant.
Right, and even that percentage could be skewed.
Right, because some of it is
Never mind.
seasonal.
And we see reports come in and they've spent less than 50% halfway through the year. I thought I saw a car in the background of your picture. Staff is reaching out to those organizations and finding out what's driving spending. And our desire is for them to fully draw down the grant. So if they have different line items that they can swap out, that are aligned to creating the same result, then we allow flexibility.
Yeah, and to follow up, we do it at the midway, at the mid-year. We do, if they haven't spent 50%, and then they just submitted their third quarter, and so I reached out to, I think there was maybe 10 across all of the grant programs that I reached out to in the last couple of days, just to make sure they're still on target. And so far, I've heard back from all but one, and none of them have indicated that they will have a problem spending all of it by the end of the year. So.
A different question. The opportunities to do site visits last year, I know we had trouble trying to get some of us available. Did we miss anybody?
No.
Okay, we did them all. Good. Highly, highly valuable.
I'm on the website for the quarterly reports. What is Black Wall Street's current organization?
City Works.
Thank you.
It looks like they have, as of their third quarter report, they've spent 92% of their earnings.
I went to the site visit this last year and I thought it was great that they helped connect people with financing. And because there's just a lot of fear around applying for financing and, lenders ask for so many things and then trying to figure out how do I get you all that information and what does that look like? That's a really important service to the community to help organize that and connect to capital. So that was great.
And they were using a fiscal sponsor.
They'll still have.
Oh, they will.
Yeah, because the Black Wall Street has become their own nonprofit, but the guidelines do require 2 years in operation, so they haven't met that. So City Works will still be their fiscal sponsor for this year.
Rachel, how many, we all try to be as objective as we can, but we have some subjective judgment because those of us that live here, we know these nonprofits, they're in the news, or we know that they do good things, or they individually solicit our contributions. how many do we feel are new to the area? Because I'm looking at our 23, and these are at least the ones that I know, been around for a long time. Do we have a bias against new nonprofits? So,
Working with-
that would be something we could just feel rather than really know.
And what's your definition of new?
Never heard of them before. I don't know if they're new work. I'm not saying they're new organizations or new to the process, but I'm always educated when I read these. Now reading them for the next iteration, I've got to know them pretty well. And, you know, if they're in the news or there's something about them, I pay more attention because I have a little bit of background.
I will say we did receive more newer applications from organizations that we haven't received before or haven't worked with or are potentially just new organizations through the Tipping Point grant program. And that I think is because it's more, it lends itself more to newer organizations, grassroots organizations that are just kind of getting started. Whereas this is a larger amount of money, potentially more reporting and strings attached to it.
I was glancing for a pattern in newer versus more well-established, smaller versus larger. At a glance, I don't see a pattern, but that's a,
No, you would be the one to know.
it's an interesting question. This grant program does look for established nonprofits so that we require a track record that some of the other grant programs don't require.
I have to admit, I am biased in favor of those more established firms that we've given year after year and that are bigger and have accomplished a lot more. I will try not to be subjective in the rating of the application, but I think I have an underlying bias towards some of them. Like if I see fiscal legal, I'm gonna read it with a very positive viewpoint, give it 1,000 points. And I shouldn't do that. But the purpose of my question is, are we giving lower scores to the newer organizations?
I think that's something that we should take a look at from a data perspective. I'm going to dig in and see if we can see any patterns. It is good to be thinking about what biases you individually show up with and try to stay true to the scoring criteria. And we've said before that that's one of the beauties of committee work, that we bring that in and somehow it all balances out.
Maybe it's time I rotate off.
Nice try.
If there's any completely candid, I'll be your counterbalance because I found myself doing the opposite. Like I'm very familiar with the legal services. Who else is going to do that? I don't know. And what are they doing and what kind of impact do they have? Because I want to try to come from places I might not be as familiar with.
That's what we all should do.
I was kind of a little bit of the opposite.
And I'll absolutely second that kind of, which is, I think we do get a feel for organizations that do work that makes differences. But there certainly are areas where we haven't seen a lot of transformation. And so if someone's bringing in a new way to do things, I'm interested in trying that out to see if there can be impact. So that might be more of a curiosity. I'm not sure how that reflects in my scoring, to be honest. I haven't actually analyzed it in that way. And maybe I should see that bias. And I wanted to mention one other thing. And one other thing I don't want to do right now, but I want to think about in terms of our scores. We do average scores, that is, we do mean scoring here. I'm wondering if we might shift to look at median in the future years. Because and this might reduce my impact on scoring, but if you have very high scores or very low scores, because everything's grouped together so closely, Especially when we go to a smaller group like 23, everything's really grouped together. And the line between 180 and then between 80 and below it is so close that if I give a really good, or someone gives a really low score, that could, and for some, let's say in some areas, let's even use that could skew it more than it would if it were a median score, where it would just be the lowest score, but it doesn't really matter what the lowest score is. What the lowest score is, 60 or 40 or 20.
I would agree with you. However, to ameliorate that, what we've done is you recommend yes or no. I think that has an impact on our decision making. So we haven't approved anybody that's less than 8 approvals.
Yeah, I agree with that. My problem with the yes and no is that often my yes is for partial funding, but I also have yeses for full funding, and they're not distinguished in that.
Not told me, and I asked the question early on, I said, what value does the yes no question have? I feel like the response was what does it have any value? And I found myself scoring some applicants very high. That their applications were great, but it just didn't quite, I felt like the funding was trying to provide. The yes no value, I wanted there to be more of a, or in some way.
That's really interesting. For me, like a yes, no, if it's a $100,000 request, but and I don't like most of it, there's a 30,000 part that really makes sense. That if I was czar, that's where I would put 30, I'd give them 30,000. I'm still answering yes, even though overall the proposal isn't interesting or doesn't carry the value of some other. So it's interesting.
It's just a bit of, it's not on the scale.
So I do want to make sure we're using our time today for establishing a potential recommendation list. And we will absolutely I've been tracking all of these pertinent conversations that we'll get to with the next meeting for kind of debriefing the process and process improvements. But it sounds like there haven't been any firm objections to what we have displayed up here right now. And I want to make sure that everyone, folks who have called in, folks in the room, have had an opportunity to voice any potential concerns or additional thoughts with what we have here.
There is $55 to spend.
Yeah, we have to figure out that $55.
Carry it over to next week.
Kate,
And use it.
maybe we just go member to member and ask, is there anything else, is there something else you want to see or something you want to change? See where we are.
Yes. Let's we'll start here and then we'll go around and get the folks on the call. Kim, what are your thoughts?
So for the most part, I am very familiar with almost all of these up here right now that in 80%. I know there's a need. I am one of those who checks yes for everyone and it is for partial or for full funding. I know if they're checking out, asking for 150,000, I know that we're not going to fund them 100%, but I do feel like they needed to be funded. The 80% that we have chosen, I really think they deserve it. And I'm okay with it. Like I said, ultimately, I'd like to give everybody funding, and I know we can't do that, so to be realistic, I'm okay with it.
And as I said in other meetings, I really believe in the scoring process to honor that. Once we decide on what that process is, then I'm always reluctant to go in and micromanage with different applications because I feel like that can bias us one way or another, each of us individually, in terms of what we advocate for or what we oppose. So I like, unless there's a real reason not to, kind of respecting the process that exists. In terms of the different funding levels, as a couple of people have said, it was really hard. But the other alternates are also good, where we can extend it out further get people some funding. But as I thought about this after our last meeting, I'm comfortable with where we are.
At the last meeting, I don't remember how the exact scenarios played out, but looking at the different options and seeing how much it was used, being able to fund more fundraisers at such a reduced amount, didn't feel comfortable. And as the smart thing that we can't fund everybody 100%. I totally agree with that. But to me, this is the best outcome. It provides the best match for money asked and money available. I feel good about this scenario.
I think over the course of the iterations that we've done this, we've made changes to the application, to the scoring system, to adding more information here, looking at last year's funding. I think the process has been very good this year. We're not finding violent disagreements like we've had in the past. Not violent. Friendly disagreements. And I think that this worked really well. We haven't made any dollar changes. Except $55 that somebody's gonna increase their home budget. Now, I like them. I'm very pleased with the outcome.
I agree. I mean, I think it's a pretty good scenario. I wish we could fund more. It's sort of heartbreaking every year to see just how far the money goes and then no farther. You wish it could go further. But I agree with the scenario that we have here. Doug?
I agree with what everyone said, and we've certainly come a long way from when we first started doing this. So, very new group, and we've been 3 sessions, I think, the first year trying to figure out where to spend our money. So this is, I think, a good compromise instead of going over each one and hashing out how much they should get. I'm happy with it.
Amy, what about you?
Sure. As a new person, I have to say the process was way easier than I thought it would be. And so the system must have been worked on quite a bit. It worked really well. I found it easy to manage the platform and I liked the side-by-side view. And I thought it was a very efficient process. I echo everybody else. I'm disappointed we can't give more grants. I was so impressed with the applications just in general. I feel really proud to live here and have so many great organizations in our area. And, but again, I spent a lot of time thinking about if there was another way to do this that made sense. And I do think we have to try to give people as much funding as we can who we do grant awards to, because they need to be successful. So I felt really good about where we landed. And I think I agree that it would be helpful if we set a limit and communicate that next year. And maybe we want to ask if there's a bottom limit to what, I don't know if that would be helpful or not. If people are able to fund the project, if they get a percent of the requested funds, just to help guide this discussion next year. That's all I have.
Kathy?
Hey there. So I like Amy said, this has been a wonderful opportunity this year, going through this. Like, it was easier than I was expecting, but also you all brought up great things and great points to make me think about other things and other ways of seeing these projects. And it's exciting to see all of this amazing work happening in our community. And so I do fully support this. And then 2 quick things to put on our June agenda I would like to discuss is if we could, on the application, have like their primary district, just so that is, I mean, I appreciate the geography served. That was wonderful. But maybe adding the district like we had to do on our applications for this position, for this role. But then also looking at like the groups that, a lot of these are established large groups, and maybe having a large funding and a smaller, under 100 served or over 100 served, something that would differentiate somebody new and not as established, but really wanting to try and start. So just an opportunity maybe to split them up into categories of big, large and small, or, but anyway, I do fully support what we've done here, and I appreciate all of your input. It's been wonderful.
So I think we've arrived at some decisions and plenty to talk about in June. Plenty of questions for June. But
So does anybody have suggestions for $55?
Well, we have an hour.
What's the lowest funded one right now?
The lowest is 80%.
I mean, like, I don't have my glasses, so there's a big blur up there, I just can't see,
I
like,
think
the
16,000 is
the lowest
amount.
amount funded.
River,
River Link is funded at 11,156,
that was also their,
but they're funded at
That's their
100%.
request.
So they're under.
They would have to be one of the lower ones that are at 80%.
We could get up to $11,200.
But that's more than they asked for.
Okay.
Has that been done before, Rachel? Is that a
Sure.
precedent that we're establishing? I don't know what that means. You're not willing to divulge, or you don't know?
I don't know if it's been done before. I don't
Okay.
see that too much of an issue.
No, I don't think it's an issue either. I would give it to them.
I was not, I probably shouldn't have spoken up. I'm not advocating for them or any, for
You're human, it's okay. I move that we give it to, I can't read, Riverlink.
Second.
Second.
Okay. I agree. I'm sure they can use it for supplies. They have a low ask, but they have a big impact in teaching.
Just let them know it doesn't happen every year.
Is anyone opposed to doing that? All right. Then I
No
think we have a
opposition.
decision. No opposition. Okay, great. So I think we have a final decision. Yeah. So, okay, we're ready. Wonderful.
Who's going to present this to the commissioners?
So we will need a motion to recommend it. And then, so this will go to the county budget office by the 28th. Staff will send that over to them. And then mid-May, it'll be published as part of the county's budget to the commissioners. And then in June, the commissioners will vote to accept the budget, which will then also accept these recommendations. And at that point, we'll turn them into service level contracts with all organizations.
Okay, I make a motion to confirm our recommendations to the county commissioners for this fiscal year.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Anyone opposed?
Yeah.
All right,
What a
wow.
group.
congratulations.
Congratulations.
I wanted to piggyback on to your comment, Angela. When we send things to the county budget office and they get incorporated into the county manager's budget message that comes out in May, that's when we reach out to all the organizations and direct them to the recommendation online. So this is a public meeting, and anyone following along can see where they're at. And we won't be reaching out, having these conversations for a couple of weeks.
And we reach out to them if they have been recommended or not, and just let them know that it's like on there. So they will all get some sort of communications from us.
Thank you again to county staff for all of the
Yes.
support, all of the data, all of the help getting us where we need to go. I know it's not easy, So really appreciate the effort that everyone puts in to make that happen.
Notice, Kate, that every year we have more staff.
Yes.
We have better enough.
But likewise, we appreciate all the work that you all do, because y'all are the ones that do the heavy lifting, reading them all, scoring them all.
And it is not an easy process to make these determinations. So,
I like the second and third, what I heard Amy and Kathy say thank you to everyone here on the committee and the staff. Coming into this, I don't know what to expect, but as a new person, it's very obvious how much work you guys have put into it. And immediately I was impressed with the application process, the scoring process, the data presented. I wasn't anticipating that level of organized information. So thanks for doing a lot of obvious work.
Yeah, we were real cave dwellers before.
And you're doing it in the midst of
I think your first year or two, we went over each organization, going up and down, last and more, really, yeah, it took quite a long time.
We individually sat down and allotted the amount of money that we thought should be funded, and then we came together.
All right, this
That was so dramatic, especially for me who waits till the last minute. Yeah, we've come a long way.
I think it's transformed since Kate's become chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Just a
Thank you
reminder,
all.
there's no meeting.
Bye.
Next meeting is June.
See you in June.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you.
anyone need parking validation?